Let's just go through what is on the back pages and the supplements here today. So we have the Sunday Independent Sport. Captain Fantastic, Masterclass from Sexton steers Leinster to sixth final, so they're into the Champions Cup final on May the 28th against Racing 92 or La Rochelle. Liverpool's Cup of Cheer, Reds still dreaming of quadruple. We have the Sunday Times Sport, Living the Dream. So Liverpool win FA Cup final shootout to keep quadruple hopes alive. 2 trophies now. And Cullen, only our best will be good enough in the final. Leo Cullen. And Rangnick, I want to help Ten Hag fix Man United. So we might get to that a bit later on, Brendan.
Oh.
You can hear the gasps of despair from Brendan O'Brien there. I think Rangnick is just almost just trying to keep himself at the club in some capacity.
Stay relevant,
I don't know if they even want him. We have the Irish Daily Mail. Let's get it done. Demolition of Toulouse leaves Leinster one step from their 5th star. And extra special Reds, Liverpool refuse to lose and keep quad dream alive with FA Cup win. 2 games, 240 minutes, no goals, 2 penalty shootout wins over Chelsea. Utterly bizarre, and Joanne will talk about the neuroscience of that shortly. Jonathan Wilson, always worth a read in The Observer, on Erling Haaland. Alf's revenge, ruthless disruptor Haaland can be the striker Guardiola craves. This is almost bringing Roy Keane into this, which is always some way bringing Roy Keane into everything. And that tackle against Alf Engel Haaland. We've got the back of the Sunday World. Pools, Cool Costa. Simicast wins FA Cup for Reds in shootout. Johnny a hero. Skipper Sexton, brilliant as Leinster reach the Euro final. 40 points to 17 win over Toulouse. And Kerry's brilliant bench is a really good weapon. Pat Spillane. And then Fighting Spirit sees Jurgen's Warriors lift another trophy, writes John Aldridge. Back of the Sun on a Sunday. Usual tabloid transfer speculation stories. He's Duggan. Frankie de Jong is willing to kiss goodbye to nearly $6 million in unpaid wages to clinch a move to Manchester City. I thought he was going to Man United, but anyway, I'm sure next week it'll be somebody else. 2 down, 2 to go. Cop KO Thomas to keep quad alive. Not been Chelsea season, has it? Reds joy, but star trio pick up injuries. So Salah, Van Dijk and Robertson all picked up injuries yesterday, the extent of which we don't not sure 100% what their prognosis is for the Champions League final. Jumpers and goals post. So Ange Postecoglou's got a favourite jumper and the Celtic fans love it. Beats Motherwell 6-0. And Galvin Ban has Clare on the canvas, writes Babs Keating. But I don't think he's not just one player. I think Clare are going to do okay today. We have the back of the Mirror. Simply Red, probably the best headline of the day. Copper FA Cup Kings as Costas holds his nerve to score the shootout winner. And Kyogan Stars and Cats win over the Dubs. A double score rather. It was a 325 to 17 points for the Dublin losing to Kilkenny yesterday in the round robin of the Leinster Championship. And Conte's temptation, which we'll get to, which is also the same story, the back of the Star. Ten Hag wants Conte. So new Man United boss Eric Ten Hag is eyeing Chelsea star N'Golo Conte to kickstart his Old Trafford rebuild. The French World Cup winner, who's 31, has got 1 year left on a Stamford Bridge contract. So Pep Mind Game, Pep Guardiola says any player who joins Manchester City must have the mental strength to cope with the pressure of playing at the highest level. I wonder, is that a message to Erling Haaland? And 2 down, 2 to go. Quad dream still on after shootout win. That's what's on the back pages this morning, folks. Nothing really amazing. A lot of match reports. Brendan, you were at Leinster yesterday. I was there as well.
Yeah, great occasion. Actually, it was funny. I was at Welford Road the week before, so I wasn't at the Munster game in the Aviva. But people who were at both of the games were telling me just before kick-off, like, there wasn't the same energy. And I think that would come from the fact that maybe there was a hope in the Leinster or in the Munster crowd, whereas it was an expectation with Leinster. But once the kick-off happened and the game started, it was just, it's a very rare occasion that you get to a sporting event and you find yourself after 10 or 15 or 20 minutes kind of exhaling and realising, oh, that's the first time I've really kind of done that in that period of time. It was just breathless stuff. The intensity of Leinster, there's been a lot of talk about their hunger, that they haven't won it in 4 years, and of course for a club like Leinster that's like a generation without that trophy. So it was a great occasion from kick-off. 42,000 crowd was incredible. Tickets only went on sale on Monday morning, so to do that in that period of time is something else. Beautiful day for it, helped get some of the Sunshine supporters out as well. And it's interesting reading the papers today. There seems to be a sense that it's Leinster's to lose now, which is obviously dangerous territory in itself. I think there was a sense of that yesterday. I think everybody's confident enough for various reasons that they would beat Toulouse, but that maybe the fact that all the cards were stacked in their favour was, from a very Irish pessimistic point of view, something to be fearful of. But you look to the final as well. There's nothing for them to be afraid of coming up against another huge top 14 opposition, you know.
Joanne, when it comes to Munster, I think the articles are more interesting because it's all about the flux and the turmoil, and they haven't won a trophy in a decade and they've got new coaches coming in. With Leinster, it's pretty boring. There's not much, Joanne, really to read about Leinster that's interesting. It's a controversy-free zone, and that's what winning does.
Yeah, exactly. And I think really with Leinster, you just see that it's a success breeds success zone. Everyone probably in that team just literally wants success. There's like without a trophy is basically a failure for Leinster. And as a Munster person, it's just so disgusting, I'm going to have to say. No, in all seriousness, I think it's impressive, from a total outsider, like looking in, you can't help. And I think they've learned a lot of lessons. I saw Johnny Sexton basically saying that, last year they let occasions, get to them. They thought about it, too much. It was all about the day rather than, they played the occasion rather than the game. And I think they would have learned a lot of lessons from that as well. So yeah, it'll just be interesting to see what they're doing. And I think, everyone's in top form. Johnny Sexton seems to be loving life. We all know when he's loving life, he's very dangerous. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think, as Brendan said, I think it's very strange to look at an Irish team and say, oh my God, it's actually theirs to lose, because we just cover ourselves with a lot of, oh dear, we're not the favourites at all. We're for underdog kind of status. So yeah, look, I mean, we'll see what'll happen. The Munster fan in me is a little bit jealous, a little bit envious, but you just have to roll with it. But hopefully, something. And it's obviously fitting as well that Munster went out in the most dramatic fashion you could ever imagine. Yes. I was at the Cup game and Dad was like, it went to penalty kicks, and I was like, I've never heard of that in my life. You're just picking things up now for Munster to get knocked out.
But it was only the second time in 27 years, so he was right. And well, you do have a Munster, I suppose, link now. You'll be the Rog Leinster final or the Mike Prendergast Leinster final now, Joanne. So you'll have to decide who you're going to support.
All hopes are on Rog. No pressure at all on him whatsoever. But if that's all you can do, just bow down to the greatness.
Big time. Neil Francis, there's nobody in the Munster or Toulouse camp with the rugby intellect of Stuart Lancaster, and so the game plan and its implementation was probably not too much of a call for him to make. And also, it was a coaching masterclass from Leinster. This is later in the piece. Lancaster's prep was decisive. The trick now is to keep him. There's a strong rumour Leo Cullen's to be given the Leinster chief executive job, which, if correct, would lead to a coaching shake-up. Whatever it takes to keep Lancaster in a tracksuit should be done. He is, after all, the de facto Ireland coach. Brendan.
Yeah, that's a line that stands out all right. When you look at the amount of time, I suppose, that he's spending with these guys and the collective influx of Leinster players into the Ireland team, it's something that you could make a strong argument for. I'm sure Andy Farrell and his coaching staff would disagree, but there is an element of truth to it, given the crossover between the two of them. It's interesting times for Leinster now. I mean, the Leo Cullen CEO rumour has been out there. Remains to be seen what happens. Leo Cullen has been on a 1-year rollover contract as well for a number of years, so it's not like he's locked down to that on a long-term basis. So we'll see what happens there. Stuart Lancaster has been asked time and time again, when is he going to move on and take the reins somewhere himself? And he's always knocked it back, and his reasoning has been, why would I leave here,
But maybe there's not that many jobs that are suitable as well.
Well, that's it. I mean, from a purely coaching rugby point of view, you look what he has in Dublin. I mean, it's actually phenomenal what he's doing, because he's still commuting over from his base in Leeds as well, all these years. So that shows a remarkable commitment to what he's doing in Dublin. And you have to look at Leinster as well. There's rumours that Felipe Contepomi will be taking up a role under Michael Checa with the Pumas in Argentina. So there could be a little bit of coaching change, musical chairs there at some point. And I think what Lancaster's influence shows us is you can have 99% of things right, but if you don't have one key element in everything, it's not going to work the way it is. You look at the influence he's had this year. You look at that 4-week stretch, or was it 3 or 4 weekend stretch in December when COVID wrecked their season, and they gave up the points to Montpellier very controversially, the 28-0 that was decided by EPCR. Lancaster had them for mini mid-season pre-season, if that's what you want to call it. So he had his hands on them for a long, long time then. Then you fast forward to the 2-week tour in South Africa, where Lancaster and all the frontliners stayed at home. So the amount of time that he has had with those guys in all that time, his fingerprints are undoubtedly all over. He is much happier on the pitch than he was as a kind of director of rugby guy with England, which ended so badly for him. So, say Leo Cullen doesn't stay on in the long term, theoretically, does Lancaster want everything that comes with a director of rugby role? Does he want to be the guy who's facing the media all the time? He's very, very well practiced with the media, as you guys know here. But does he want all that in his role? And where he is at the moment, it just seems to suit him. It suits everybody. His stock has gone up considerably. I mean, there's talk in one of the other pieces, Stuart Barnes in the Times talking about Ronan O'Gara as being one of the leading contenders for the England role after Eddie Jones goes.
Ronan O'Gara, England.
Yes,
Joanne,
absolutely.
come on, this is an April Fool's joke.
This is something I think that has been mentioned before. So I mean, Ronan O'Gara has to be up there.
Ronan
As
O'Gara
Irish
would
people,
never coach England.
As Irish people, we have to say, look, that's beyond the pale. But why not?
Would Ronan O'Gara ever coach England in your view, Joanne?
I mean, listen, I eyebrow raised when Brendan said that. I thought my eyebrows would fall off. They went up so high there when I heard it. But I mean, as Brendan said, it's against the pale. But if the opportunity came up, could you really begrudge it to him beyond the hatred for England? I don't know. God, that actually gives me anxiety. I'm not going to lie.
Ronan O'Gara has described the England job as a cracking job.
Has he?
Yes, he has.
Right.
So I mean, it's a professional coaching world. You look at Conor O'Shea, who's done great things in the English game with Harlequins. I think he was with the English Institute for Sport. He's now involved in the RFU. You look at England as well. They've had South Africans, they've had Australians, they've had people from all over the world coaching them in rugby, in football, in cricket. They don't care where they come from. They're going for the best guys. They've got Brendan McCullum in, the New Zealand legend, to take over their Test cricket team. These guys don't care. If you're from Cork or you're from Melbourne or whatever, if you're the guy for the job, they'll look for you.
Well, we obviously have the same view with Andy Farrell.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but that's professional sport, isn't it? I mean,
Raj for me would seem to be an obvious Ireland coach of the future.
Yeah, and an obvious Munster coach. But that's what we take for granted. And he has said time and time again, you can't take these things for granted. Everybody thinks that himself and Paul O'Connell will one day ride back into England or to Limerick on the white horses, and everything will be fine. But that life doesn't work out like that all the time. And he said as well that he doesn't have a plan down the road. He doesn't plan these things. Who knows where life takes a Ronan O'Gara or anybody?
Now, I'm sure that's a sporting hatred you mean there, Joanne.
Listen, Brendan, I mean, did Ollie Gunnar have a great time there at Man United? So sometimes it doesn't happen your way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I do think they made Lancaster fall guy in 2015, England. Like, if they give him another chance, would they have won a World Cup with them? It was a very, very painful World Cup exit in a group stage at home.
Yeah.
So, in a way, it was inevitable he would be sacked. But, even Australia, they're linking him with Eddie Jones now in 2027. Yeah. So, Eddie Jones' stock is obviously seen as high, even though England at the moment are a bit of state of flux. It's interesting as well, the two players that didn't make the New Zealand setup, Gibson-Park and Lowe, were sensational yesterday. And there's comment from Stuart Barnes on Gibson-Park in the Sunday Times as well. It's just going through that at the moment. Was kind of talking about the ruck speed and stuff. It was just fascinating stuff. Leinster's were recycling ball within 1.5 seconds. It leaves the defences floundering and attacks charging, but the scrum half has to pick his options in split seconds. The Ireland number 9 is that Aaron Smith-like expertise in choosing the right option. Leinster want what the French have had for the past 2 seasons. Gibson-Park attitude as much as his skill epitomises this hungry, talented team. So I just think that Gibson-Park just completely epitomises what Leinster and Ireland are about now. And rugby, at times I find it difficult to watch. I think the players go through each other and around each other. But yesterday it was all about tempo. It was all about movement. It was all about this relentless, constant metronomic movement of Leinster, and that was really exciting to watch.
Absolutely, and all the discussion about Leinster in the last 3 years, that they've lost to Saracens twice and they've lost to La Rochelle, it's been kind of boiled down to this simplistic, they don't have the physicality to deal with the big teams. I've been as guilty of harping on about that in Examiner as much as anyone. But there is obviously an element of truth to it, a large element of truth to it. And you look like Will Skelton, what Will Skelton did to them with Saracens and La Rochelle in previous years. But that's the great thing about watching Leinster play, that they do it in a kind of a more aesthetically pleasing way. It shows that rugby can be, it's not all about who's biggest is best. And it was very noticeable yesterday. I don't know if it was because of maybe a perceived tiredness on Toulouse's part, but the amount of, I'm going to use a rugby term now, soft shoulders. That
oh, no.
Sorry, I hate myself for it. I do, I really do. But the amount of times that they went into contact with the ball in hand and they slipped off a tackle in a good way, Leinster, and they'd make an extra 3 or 4 metres. It was astonishing. That's to do, we go back to Lancaster, the quality of the coaching, the footwork that we see from these forwards. You saw the outrageous pass that Tyke Furlong played. The loop pass half the width of the field before he came off was just ridiculous. So the skill factor that they have among their forwards is something that we haven't really seen before. And then you ally that into the likes of Lowe and Gibson-Park, very clever, canny signings that they've made, and both of them are playing world-class rugby at the moment. As what I said earlier on with Lancaster, you can have 99% of the things right, but if something else is off kilter, it holds you back. Everything Leinster are doing at the moment seems to be right on the money.
Joanne, the papers don't really have much analysis of Liverpool, as mainly more match reports, but you watched them, and I read the piece you did in the Irish Times with Leanne Kiernan during the week. The men's team yesterday, it wasn't Simicast or Allison that won the cup, it was the neuroscientists apparently.
It was. I mean, everyone knows that Jurgen Klopp is all about the extra 1%, you know, between the throw-in coaches telling ball boys to throw the ball in very quickly, you know, during their game against Barcelona where they came back, to now bringing in neuroscientists for penalty shootout. Like, Gareth Southgate was there, so I think he's definitely taking notes there on what possibly to do. But yeah, psychology and penalties, that's the new thing these days. That's what it's all about. It's no longer a lottery, lads. I hate to break that bad news. It's all about, as Jurgen Klopp would say, mentality monsters and getting it right. So yeah, I think from experience, I remember doing some dabbling in psychology in college and specifically looking at penalties. And I think first rule of thumb is you don't send your star striker up. That's usually a disaster. You celebrate every penalty score as if your life is depending on it. You stand as close as you possibly can to the bench. And more importantly, if there's a big penalty to take, you don't send a star, you send some little fella down the road. And that's what Jurgen Klopp did. He sent up Costas and he delivered. And I mean, listen, he said it himself. He said the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup is solely down to a crowd called Neuro 11 in Germany, which is 4 neuroscientists who came over and drilled all this information into Liverpool for the last number of years. But I think it just goes to show you it's the 1% now these days. You know, I mean, I think Thomas Tuchel even said it. He said, yeah, Liverpool are great because they can roll out teams Saturday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Saturday again, and it doesn't take a dent no matter who they put in. So that's just the way we're at the moment. And yeah, it's I'm not a Liverpool supporter myself, so it's sad as well to see.
So what's your team, Joanne?
I'm a Barcelona fan.
Oh well, that's you know, that's a classy answer.
I had to fully embrace watching the ball boys being trained, because I went to Anfield for the Barcelona game, and as soon as I saw the ball boys throwing in balls super quickly, I thought there's something going on here. There has to be something going on here. And yeah, it's those 1%. It's those 1%. But it kind of reminds me, like, I think, you know, like we see it all the time. And I think there's like a bit of snobbery in it too, like in the GAA, that if you see these kind of people coming in, like these extra 1%ers, you know, like your wellness people, your psychologists, your neuroscientists, if you can afford it, different people like that. I think people actually, you know, I mean, listen, we can hype it up to the cows come home, but I think there's a science to it. You know, and I think with Jurgen Klopp, his method is if there's a science to it, he will find it out and he will bring over whatever necessary method. It wouldn't surprise me if he had Wim Hof, you know, the breathing expert who goes into ice. It wouldn't surprise me if he was there at Liverpool either, just with how many people they bring in all the time.
Well, Alisson was very intense in the shootout and he made a brilliant save from Mount.
Actually, yes. You have to take your time, you know, you have to. You just have to stare the person down and make them uncomfortable. I don't know if you remember the World Cup, I think it was in Brazil. And Jasper Kielesen was subbed on, and he would smile at the penalty takers because it would put them off, and it used to put them off non-stop. So there you go, just smile and stare down the person apparently is the way to go.
I'm old enough to remember when psychology and penalty shootouts amounted to Bruce Grobbelaar wobbling his knees in Roma.
Yeah, well, Mendy was trying yesterday, he was trying to move around. But it is the psychology. You've 240 minutes of football and 2 shootouts. Yeah. Caoimhín Kelleher, the hero, the last day, and obviously he wasn't on the pitch yesterday. But Mane missed. You know, you think Mane's going to score, missed. Reece James just lobbed it straight into the middle of the goal. The keeper dived the wrong way, but
you look at Roberto Baggio in '94 as well, one of the most celebrated of
and got Italy to the final on his own.
Absolutely,
it's sure ourselves back in 1990. Romania, Paki Bonner saving and David O'Leary scoring. David O'Leary, who would have thought was the most unlikely of scorers in a penalty shootout. But Kostas Tsimikas scoring for Liverpool. Nothing much, as I said in the papers, about it. Interesting, like Henry Winter writing about Romelu Lukaku. He worked hard but lacked the guile, the hunger and the mobility to elude Van Dijk and Kanate. I think he's really playing at a higher altitude than Inter Milan, and it's shown. Doesn't really fit into the Tuchel system. Quite amazing though, Jurgen Klopp has won the lot now. He's won every trophy now, Joanne. He's won the FA Cup, the League Cup, the Champions League, the Premier League.
Yeah, himself and Trent Alexander-Arnold, they've done it in the quickest time span. Trent Alexander-Arnold has 6 major trophies at the grand old age of 23, and now Jurgen Klopp has won, I think, the quickest amount of trophies ever. Actually, I mean, this might be borderline semi-controversial, I'm not really too sure, but one thing, and people are going to say this is because she's not a Liverpool fan, and I'll take that on the chest happily, but a lot of people come out and they say they'll be the first English club to potentially win, the quad. And I think that's kind of wrong, because it was Arsenal women in 2007, the Emma Byrne team, that incredible team who won, 6 trophies, were totally unstoppable and won every single game. So that's my minor issue at the moment with some of the publicity it's getting. Like, they'll be the first in the men's, and correctly so, but they won't be the first in football overall. That honour goes to, Vic Akers of the Arsenal ladies. So I just feel the need to put that out all the time. Because I think it's important, sports records also belong to women too. But
absolutely, and in Gaelic games as well, we see that, don't we? Gaelic games, it's Dublin's 5 in a row, and they beat. Whereas actually Kerry in the ladies' football, or Kilkenny in the Camogie, had better records.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, best of luck to Jurgen Klopp and his quad adventure. My neighbour has put up, I think he's going to put up probably 4 Liverpool flags at this stage. Because going up every time they win a trophy.
I have my own issues with the quad as well. Unrelated to that, one is they haven't a hope of doing it. Yeah, we keep talking about it. I mean, they haven't. I mean, they're just not going to do it. You're looking for Man City to absolutely implode, and they went to Molineux during the week, and people said, this is a tricky one. Wolves could do it to them. What happened? They got absolutely minced. My bigger problem with the quad is that it's being capped in all the newspapers. I don't know, why are we capping quadruple? That's purely ridiculous journalism kind of thing, but anyway.
Okay. I went into Paddy Cullen's for Heineken Zero after the Aviva yesterday in Ballsbridge in Dublin, and when Tsimikas scored, the place went mad. It's a deep support that exists for Liverpool Football Club in this island. Like, it really is deep. Man United would be the same, but you just don't get that for other clubs. You're not going to get it for Shamrock Rovers as much as League of Ireland fans had wanted. You're not going to get it for Manchester City, I would say, but you're going to get it for Liverpool, Man United.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just what we all grew up with, isn't it? But
yeah, but it's continuing. Like, even my nephew, he's in his early 20s. Yeah. He's deeply into it, and it goes through families. It goes through a thread of families. The Liverpool, Man United, Celtic as well, maybe Arsenal.
There's a good academic study to be done there. I mean,
there is, yeah. But it is real, and people go, "Oh, you only support your domestic game." You're not going to get that level of decibel of support.
No.
And that's just one pub, and on all the pubs around the country.
Yeah, and again, like, you go through Dublin Airport on a Saturday morning, as I did last week for the Leicester game, and there was Derby jerseys, West Bromwich Albion. There was a little kid, 5-year-old, with his dad wearing a West Bromwich Albion jersey. So was he, by the way. So you just wonder what's ahead for that poor chap as he gets older. But for the most part, it's Liverpool, it's Man U, and it's Celtic.
Yeah,
and they still hold it.
And it's real, and we need to embrace, and we need to obviously develop a football industry in this country and support our domestic game and go to more matches, and we all should be going to Tallaght Stadium and Dalymount Park and more, and hopefully we'll have a Munster team in the League of Ireland and the Premier Divisions sooner rather than later. Cork City will get back, but this is also real. You can have both. I think that's good. That you're not competing pillars of world football.
Great crowd in Tallaght on Friday night, 7,000 to 8,000 I believe, for the game against Derry City.
The top two in the league. The championship, there's so much going on, and we're on air on News Talk from 1 to 7 with 2 Premier League commentary games. We got West Ham, Manchester City, Stephen Doyle and Brian Kerr calling that one. We also have Jessica Farry and Vinnie Perth calling Everton Brentford. But we'll have reporters at Dublin Meath, at Kildare Westmeath, at Cork and Waterford, and also at Derry Monaghan in the Ulster Senior Football Championship semi-final. But the Tailteann Cup is something that you kind of want to talk about, Joanne, based on a piece, I think, in the Sunday Times today.
I know this is obviously me bringing out my inner Cork bias and solely reading Cork writers here. Problem. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Mick Foley had a piece basically talking about how the Tailteann Cup is basically there to kind of make its own history, and people were giving out about the situation with New York, it being a north-south, division, situation going on with how the draw is going to be made. And I think, you're going to expect teething problems. I always compare to, this is obviously the most odd comparison you could make, but I compare it to season 1 of Drive to Survive. When that came out, Mercedes and Toto Wolff wanted nothing to do with it. Too dramatic, stay away from me. And now look at Toto, absolute prime character in Drive to Survive. So I think it's really, like the Tailteann Cup, I think Mick Foley's right. Like it's up to it to make its own, history. I'm sure when the Champions League and the Premier League and all those started out, everyone was like, why am I in this? I think it actually, someone was even saying, actually was in the Mick Foley article, that even when the GA Championship started, that there was no Connacht, teams or anything like that involved until, late 18, 19, early 1900s, So, I think it's just a situation where people are going to just have to back it. Teams are just going to have to understand that they're there and there for a reason. Obviously, you've like the odd ones, like Cavan, who seem to go all hell for leather for championship, but refuse to acknowledge the league as a system. So, it's just, I think just every team has to take it one step at a time and just understand that, the content that they put out is what we'll see, and it's what's going to be promoted. And if they're going to put out good content, then, the Tailteann Cup might be a little bit of success after. And I think, the Willy Wonka golden ticket of being in a potential Sam Maguire chase then next year, like surely be to God, that's enough, and like not to throw an absolute nuclear bomb into this entirely, but surely teams can understand, that playing Dublin and getting demolished by 15 or 16 points just isn't good, that they should be playing themselves. And it's why the league works so well, because we see top teams playing top teams and then the lower teams playing lower teams, and it's way more exciting. As a Cork fan, flirting with the Tailteann Cup, it probably would have killed my soul, but at least I would have had a shot in All-Ireland. I would have taken that in a month of Sundays.
Is marketing the issue, though, Joanne? When you think of Drive to Survive, it's the marketing, it's the amazing production, it's the accessibility towards a new audience, it's the fact that you're going to have a Las Vegas Grand Prix next year.
Yep.
To me, like this is just appearing on our doorstep, the Tailteann Cup, and we don't almost know what to do with it. And by the time you get to July, August. Now I know we've had 2 years of COVID. I don't want to get into another calendar debate because I'll be here till 3 o'clock, and I've had the whole club community on my back on Twitter all week. But the marketing of this and also the buy-in from the players is huge.
Absolutely, and I think marketing, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is absolutely key. If we, as in we, the media, and I hate even using terms like that, but if we even treat it, like a competition that it deserves, like it's a thing. But I think as well, looking over, say, to like ladies football, you notice how successful that is. The senior, intermediate, and junior situation. Sure, obviously the junior intermediates will complain that they don't get media attention until All Ireland final day, and that's a bigger debate, as you were just saying there, for another day. But I think having that day out in Croke Park, I think being able to structure it in a way where, they're basically playing the same days as... you obviously want them playing in the same venue. You probably don't want them in the same days because that's just a limitation on how much then we can actually cover ourselves. But, you have to market it too in a way where it's appetizing, it's appealing. There's surely some rivalry we can all dig into, look at it on that. And I don't even want to get into the whole debate about the GA versus the media myself and how much we need players and the stories and the various things going on around, counties in Ireland for it to be a driven thing. But, that's what we need on top of it. We need to have the lovely stories, we need to have the fluff stuff. And also we need to be able to get our teeth into something when it comes to why should we be interested in Wexford versus Wicklow or, someone like that, or why should we be interested in Cavan versus whoever, you just have to tell people you're interested, that's it, and then people will just watch it.
What's your view on this?
Yeah, I think like from a media point of view, I think it's instructive if you look at the national leagues. Like, do we ever get any coverage really of Division 3 or 4 or even Division 2? You see the highlights programmes on TV. There just isn't the media structure there to really give it a proper coverage. So
I think it would be if it was the champion. If that was the structure of the championship, I think it would.
I don't know. Just even from a logistical point of view, trying to get markings, trying to get people to cover all these is an issue in itself, and that's not a cop-out. I mean, I think, going back to Joanne's point, I think it is crucial that these are played on All-Ireland final day and All-Ireland semi-final day.
What about All-Ireland final day? You have 82,000 people, like Dublin playing Kerry, say, or Dublin playing Mayo. You could fill it twice over. Is there not going to be an issue then with ticketing?
But that's it. I mean, there's no magic bullet here for it. But if you want to give the Tailteann Cup its due exposure, well, what do you do with it? What will you get if you have a Tailteann Cup that's played in Croke Park on the Saturday of an All-Ireland final? Even if you try to build up a kind of an All-Ireland final weekend extravaganza like an NFL, it'll still be 3/4 empty. It'll still be 9/10 empty. And that's the reality of it. If you want to make this attractive to counties and especially managers in the Tailteann Cup, you have to have this. And Joanne is right, there is the Willy Wonka chocolate ticket of this is your place in the championship next year, but you need to make that attractive to them now. I was at the Wexford Offaly game down in Wexford Park a few weeks ago, after which we spoke to John Maughan, the Offaly manager, when they'd lost, and we said, John, what's the story going to be now with the Tailteann Cup? And he said, I think his words were, John Maughan is not going to stand in any lad's way who wants to go to America. So that's what you're up against. What I love about Michael Foley's piece today is he didn't mention the Tommy Murphy Cup once. You know, that's the elephant in the room, and you know that's probably deliberate in could be deliberate in Michael's piece, because that's what everybody's looking at. Is this the Tommy Murphy Cup Mark II? That's what everybody is thinking. And without the buy-in for the managers, it's dead in the water. It really is, in the short term anyway.
Okay. Once again, not much, because there's so many matches going on. We have Kilkenny winning last night, Brendan.
Yeah,
and
surprising second half there.
Comprehensively so. And Westmeath and Wexford drawing, which was interesting. Brian Lowen, there's a piece on him in the Irish Sunday Independent, Dermot Crowe. His popularity among hurling people from every county is down to his genuine personality. Straight shooter, and has got Clare playing to the extent where they could be in a Munster final. Brendan.
Yeah, interesting guy, Brian Lohan. Doesn't say a whole lot, media terms or whatever, but he's gone in there and he's done an exceptional job. When you think of all the controversy about Clare with facilities and everything else, county board issues, it's not so long ago we were wondering, you know, where did Clare GA go from here? For them to be putting it up to Limerick today, the championship needs it as well. You know, there's some questions about Limerick after the first couple of games. Are they the Limerick of previous years? Tipperary ran them very, very close. So what we need is a strong showing from Clare. We need a strong Clare in hurling. You look at Tipperary and Cork at the moment, who are obviously in rebuilding phases. So he's a really interesting guy. Be interested to see how it goes today.
What about Cork, Joanne? Walsh Park 2:00 throw in, but it would be quite amazing if the aristocrats of hurling in Munster, Cork and Tipperary, were the two teams relegated from this round robin.
I know it's not. I think it's not at the stage that Cork hurlers actually thought they would be in. You know, obviously it's incredibly disappointing from a Cork perspective. I mean, they are the team that is held so closely by the Cork public. You know, I remember there was a really good article in the Examiner a couple of years ago where it basically said, you know, that the footballers were actually, you know, at that time the footballers were the ones who were actually the most recent All-Ireland winners, and no one seems to care about them. But the hurlers are held to such a high regard, it's impossible to even disrespect them. But I think it's obviously disappointing. You know, they will be disappointed with how they're kind of going. But I think the style of hurling that they're just trying to, you know, I mean, we see with, like, you know, Blackrock, you know, the Bars and Glen Rovers, you know, in club hurling, like they play a brand. Oh God, I even hate saying that. They play a brand of hurling it's free flowing, it's fast, it's energetic. It's not like move through the phases, you know, type of hurling. It's just get the ball up, you know, get it to your big forward and just pump it over the bar. And I think hurling is gone to the stage where, you know, yes, you have to play it through the lines a little bit, but you do have to mix it up. And you notice that with Cork all the time. They just refuse to mix it up, and then they'll get a random burst of energy in the third quarter, and then all of a sudden they'll just fade again because it's too much to overcome. Yeah, I think that's basically where Cork is at the moment. You know, and when I was at the football game last week, you know, all the stewards were saying to me how, you know, it's not to sound full Pat Spillane on this, but it's fellas with earpieces in the stands telling Gary Kingston what to do. And I don't think that's the problem either. I think it's just there's probably Is there just too much input from anyone? I'm not too sure. But I think to see where Cork hurling is in Tipperary as well, I think it is incredibly sad. Because I think, for the likes of Tipperary, they also probably would have had a shout and they would have been confident as well, with management and stuff like that. But it just doesn't seem to be there. And I think the post-mortem at the end of the season is going to be ruthless, but it has to be ruthless to understand what is going wrong. Why can't we translate the lovely form and lovely hurling of club hurling not into county? Why is it a completely different game? And yeah, it's going to be ruthless, it's going to be sore, but it's got to be done, unfortunately. If
hurling's half dressed without Tipperary, what's it like without Tip and Cork?
Great.
A lot of people would say that, wouldn't they? Yeah.
They've enough All-Irelands between them. No, but seriously, I do think Cork does need a strong hurling team, and I do think last August's defeat to Limerick was a painful defeat for Cork, and the scars of that at Croke Park, as Cork always had that natural confidence and swagger and belief they could turn up any year and win the All-Ireland hurling title. That does not exist anymore. We're in a completely different landscape where the whole thing is flipped to be Limerick, Clare and Waterford, probably the three teams to get out of the Munster round robin. But it's not over yet. Cork still have a chance. The best article today, and it's very, very tough read. It will always be only yesterday. Tommy Conlon speaking to Tracy Tully, her life a realm of constant suffering since the murder of her son, boxer Kevin Sheehy. So Kevin Sheehy was a very promising heavyweight boxer from Limerick who had the world at his feet, a hugely promising talent, murdered in 2019 by Logan Jackson. And the reason why Tommy spoke to her is that on Saturday last, I'm quoting the article here, as she received confirmation Logan Jackson would be transferred within a month to a prison near his home in the English Midlands. The family's concerned that if Jackson's repatriated, they'll have no recourse to the judicial system in England. I'm just reading about Kevin Sheehy here, a boxer from the Francis Boxing Club, St Francis Boxing Club in Limerick. In August 2016, he won a national boxing title, the under-18 super heavyweight class. In January 2018, age 19, he won the national under-22 heavyweight title. It's just speaking about the grief that Tracy has endured. The grief takes her down to the black fathoms where there's no sunlight penetrating it. She says she feels there are weights attached to her wrists and ankles that drag her down to these unknown depths. It's a realm of constant suffering. She says she haunts her own house at night, walking around in a daze, submerged in this pitiless silence. She lives with Cassidy, her daughter, born 7 years after Kevin, their dog Max. Kevin's daughter was born after he was murdered. Just to read a bit more on this, on the CCTV footage that captured the incident that night, Kevin and his cousins could be seen walking away from the flashpoint with Jackson and his friend. It's hard for me, says Tracy, because I taught him right and wrong from a very young age. And I always said to him, they're lethal weapons now you have in your hands as a trained boxer. I always said to him, if you ever out and there's trouble looming, walk away. Walk away, don't engage. And he did. He walked away. It kills me every day. I'm still very proud that he walked away. I'm very proud my son walked away. So Keva, Emma and Kevin's daughter, was born in August of 2019, a couple of months after he was murdered. She gives me that little bit of will to live, says Tracy. It shouldn't be. It's not fair on her. I mean, she was born into such grief. She's got this amazing ability to make us laugh. She's a lot of her father's characteristics and in his intelligence. An excellent article by Tommy Conlon speaking to Tracy Tully. And you'd have to wonder why these extradition policies are in place. Just very tough read, isn't it, Brendan? It's just
very, very, very tough read, and
heart goes out to them.
Absolutely, and brilliantly written by Tommy. That's such. I mean, the subject matter is so hard, obviously, but to get that tone, I suppose, right, to make it readable in that sense. I mean, it's such harrowing subject matter, but it's dealt with so well. The account of the incident itself is one of the hardest things you'll ever have to read in a sports section of a newspaper. It's just awful beyond words, and just coming away from it, it makes you think, like, we see these things on the news, we hear about them in the news, we read about them in the newspapers, and our lives go on. But I think one of the quotes that really stuck with me is his mum saying how she looks at her sister's faces and it's a haunted look. I can see it on their faces, so I can imagine what they can see on mine every day, and that really sits with you. It's just, what do you say about a piece like that? It's just so hard to kind of digest it. It's harrowing in every sense of the word.
Yeah, it is. And Kevin's very well remembered in the piece, isn't he, Joanne?
Yeah, Kevin, I mean, the character that he was, the boxer that he was, and I think being able to put his achievements alongside the personality that he is. You know, it didn't dilute the piece at all. It was still very sad. You felt like it was a talent lost, and I think more importantly, you felt anger, sadness and grief on behalf of the Sheehy family, because it's just unimaginable, I think, what they go through. You know, I mean, obviously we see the sports star and we see the fellow boxing in the ring, but it's the person every day that they're around that has been taken away from them, you know, so cruelly. And I think it's just so incredibly sad. You can't really put into words. And I think, you know, Brendan's right, the tone of the piece was just so, you know, it gave him you had such an image of Kevin, but also you had such an image of the pain left behind. And I think to hear that he has a young daughter now, growing up, who is, you know, according to the mother, you know, total characteristics, I think that's lovely. But I think I could just imagine the pain every day of looking at, you know, a 2.0 but not having, you know, the Kevin that she wants. Must be incredibly sad.
Yeah, to be honest, I cheered up, you know, reading that about a half an hour ago. It's just, yeah. So thoughts with the family of Kevin Sheehy. Eamon Sweeney, going backwards in a hurry, back of the Sunday Independent today. This is interesting about Irish athletics. Every single week Eamon Sweeney's got an original column, and this is another one. Sport Ireland's pre-games targets for the Tokyo Olympics were 3 top 8, 6 top 16 and 10 top 24 places for athletics. The team fell spectacularly short with just 1 top 8, 3 top 16 and 5 top 24 places. At the Rio Olympics, with a much smaller team, the Irish athletes had 2 top 8, 7 top 16 and 7 top 24 places at a time when the overall Irish performance was the best since 1996. Irish athletics went backwards at the rate of knots. The upshot is that the sport has lost its position at the head of the high performance funding table, slipping to third behind rowing and Paralympic sport. The Irish media, myself included, pussyfoots around athletics to a certain degree. The demands on the competitors are so great, the competition so tough, we're reluctant to call out failure. But accentuating the positive has become counterproductive. Predictions that great things may have been off in the major championships are regularly followed by a string of disappointing displays. Our well-meaning optimism only contributes to public cynicism and indifference. Perhaps the most discouraging thing about last week's indictment of athletics was that it had little impact. Few care anymore. You got to think about Sonia Sullivan, Derval O'Rourke, John Tracy, Jerry Kiernan, Eamon Coughlin, all these great athletes we've had in our history. And is there an accountability deficit, I wonder, Brendan, when it comes to Irish athletics delivering results?
It's a very, very good question. I always think of horse racing as a subset of sport, in a way that a lot of people who love sport find horse racing hard to get into. And
Are you one of those?
Yeah, I am. Even though I covered Cheltenham for 10 years, I find it's just there's a barrier, whether it's perceived or real, that people don't really get it. And I think athletics is similar in the sense that you look at athletics, it's a huge area. You know, you've a sprinter, you've a long distance runner, you've a hammer thrower. You know, it's a subset in itself. It's a little defined world by itself. It's hard to have the expertise to cover that. Do you know what I mean? It's something over there in the corner. It's not a main sport. From a media point of view, I think it's a little bit daunting to get into it at times. Is it given a kind of a free pass? I don't know, but there are definitely questions being asked about how we go forward with athletics in terms of the Olympics now. And that Tokyo review last week that is mentioned, there was definitely talk about how do we proceed in terms of the numbers of athletes that we have at future Olympics. And clearly athletics was top of the pile when we were thinking about that. That was our biggest ever team in Tokyo. And as Eamon says, the athletic side of it did not go well. So how do we approach that in the future? Do we have less athletes? Do we narrow in on who we give the funding to in athletics? And as we've seen from the funding that came out this year, do we divert the funding towards rowing or boxing or whatever that are more likely to bring us medals? Now, there's another side to that as well. Great Britain in the last 10 or 15 years absolutely went hammer and tongs after medals.
And cycling especially.
Yeah.
They decided to go after cycling about 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
And the results were incredible. And the velodrome, all this kind of stuff.
And yet look at the culture that fostered and the stories we've seen coming out about bullying and everything else so my point being is the other example in Team GB was basketball in Great Britain was totally defunded nearly. because they weren't considered an Olympic medal hopeful, and yet in participation terms it was enormous.
Right.
So what's your priority here? We always have this participation versus elite success. So where does the money go? Athletics is a very accessible sport. You know, you don't need anything. People talk about all you need for football is a ball and a couple of jumpers. For athletics, all you need is to run outside.
Well, if you look at participation sports in Ireland, I would estimate that swimming and athletics are right up the top.
Yeah. So do we say to sports that are not medaling at the Olympics, and yet there has to be an accountability at the same time. So it's a very difficult balance for Sport Ireland and people at the top of sport in this country to get it right. I think there's no question about it that athletics is struggling, and people will tell you it is a truly global sport.
Of course.
Truly global.
That's why Sonia, a lot of people would say, is our greatest ever.
Absolutely, in a way that rowing probably isn't. You know, you will have world and Olympic champions from countries in athletics that you would never have in rowing. So it's a very complicated issue. I don't have any of the right answers for it, but there's clearly things that can be done. I mean, one of the shortfalls in Irish athletics for years has been coaching, and again this comes back to how diverse a sport it is. Like, how do you set up a coaching system for athletes who are based all over the country in different disciplines, all over the world in some instances, you know, who are very individual people who do their own thing, and we'll see an article from Shane McGrath about how that feeds into it. So it's a very big issue, not just in terms of funding, but in terms of logistics, how you fund it, its role in the Olympic cycle. Athletics is a huge part of the Olympics as well. Do we just accept that this isn't for us anymore in that sense?
Well, can we say with confidence we're going to get a medal in the Paris Olympics in 2024 in track and field? I would say no. Now I would say no. The Shane McGrath's article in the Irish Daily Mail, just about, they're talking about the Social Research and Economic Institute commissioning by the GA and GPA. The inter-county players can spend up to 31 hours a week on their commitments to the game. Anne-Marie McGlynn, 42 years of age, competing in the marathon at the European Athletics Championships this August. I'm doing 90 miles a week. That probably 8 hours of running. Then you got 2 hours of strength and conditioning. Then your physio, Hugh Armstrong, going to compete in the marathon as well at the European Athletics Championships. The Mayo man won the Wrexham Marathon 3 weeks ago. His time of 2 hours 14 minutes 4 seconds, breaking the Welsh all-comers record that stood since 1963. He's still running up to 15 hours a week. Then you go stretching, you go into the gym. It's 2.5 hours a day at least. He's also a trainee accountant working for on post in the GPO. He'll have exams to consider in the coming months too. There's the logistical challenge of finding the time to work full-time, study and still train twice a day, Joanne.
Yeah, it's definitely not an ideal place, and I think you notice in the likes of the Great Britons, the Americas, all those countries who are producing athlete after athlete after athlete. Like, sport and study is an extreme, like they're so together, in what they do. Whereas in Ireland, we tend to divide it into 3 different segments. Sport is separate to work, which is separate again to study, which I think has also gone against us, in that we just don't embrace, the likes of the student athletes, coming through, and instead we just put more and more pressure on them every single time something comes about. But, I think that's the thing with athletics. I think it's not that people don't care, it's just that less people seem to be as invested in the whole athletics course. If I think 20 years ago, athletics was huge in our house, absolutely huge, whereas now one of us maybe cares, and I think that just it's quite sad to see on top of it. And I think then you also see, I think Eamon Sweeney had it in his piece, Cathal Dennehy is obviously one of the biggest advocates for athletics here in Ireland, and he publishes a piece that's a little bit controversial before the Nationals, and Athletics Ireland gives him a phone call and says, PT Dubs, you're not coming to be our commentator, yet he would be the prime person to be a commentator after his Depths of Hell commentary. So, I think sometimes as well they do shoot themselves in the foot that way. It's not a very popular thing to say. I think only, last year was it Sonia was the only one who was like, we need to start asking questions about why they were in Tokyo so early, and yet they were complaining about climatisation. There's just so much of it I think you just have to consider. But, going back to, the people behind the stories, these are the ones who are most impacted by the funding cut. It's not the fellows who are sitting at the top, it's not the suits at the table or whatever it may be. It's the people who are putting in the hard hours day in, day out, trying to balance life, trying to balance their sport, and also trying to make their country proud, and having that pressure on them then on top of it. So we also do need to look at it that way. Like, why do we immediately look at an athlete and go, this person is going to do such big things for us in the Olympics, but yeah, when push comes to shove, the funding's not there, we're kind of looking at it going, why aren't they doing well?
Yeah, why don't we separate the funding for the athletes from the accountability for the organisations?
Yeah, like, I mean, I think we kind of tend to throw the accountability a little bit more at the athlete. Like, you know, I would notice that from, okay, I'm obviously talking about armchair experts as well here, you know, but we tend to kind of look at going, oh, why didn't she perform? She mustn't be that great, or he mustn't be that great. Yeah, we kind of refuse to look at the outside perspective as well. And again, these are just armchair experts, you know, but this is what you'd see obviously day in, day out. And it must be incredibly frustrating. You know, it must be really annoying to hear that your organisation, you know, everyone is kind of letting them go by, but yet you're the one when push comes to shove, you're the one who's crossing the line, having to do the media interview time and time again, going, yeah, I just wasn't at my best today. You know, when do we look at it and say, why aren't these people at their best when it comes to, you know, the big tournaments? You know, I think we do have to start asking questions. I'm kind of with Brendan. I don't think funding cutting is kind of the way to go, but I think at the same time in Ireland we do have an issue, not just in sports, but we do have an issue with throwing money at things in the hope that it does go away. You know, like hoping to God, you know, okay, here's another 7 million, please build a children's hospital or whatever is going on at the moment. So yeah, I think you have to look at it too from that point of view. You know, if we're sending in money, we have to start looking at realistic targets that they're meeting and then maybe asking questions rather than cutting funding immediately. But I suppose then on the flip side, maybe Sport Ireland are just sick of Athletics Ireland not coming through time and time again. Who knows?
This is the Sunday Paper Review. Joanne Reardon and Brendan O'Brien with me this morning. Phil Mickelson, the PGA Championship takes place next Thursday in Oklahoma, Southern Hills, and he will not be there. He's the defending champion. Golf is embroiled in a kind of, I suppose, a fledgling civil war without any arms. The arms are money. The arms race is all about money. So we have Brendan. Alan Shipnuck is this very good golf writer who's been on the beat for about 20 years, and he's bringing out a book on Tuesday called Phil, about Phil Mickelson's career, 6-time major champion, probably the second best golfer. Maybe you could add Rory to the mix there, but the second best golfer of the generation of Tiger Woods, behind Woods. And you know, Phil Mickelson's withdrawal from his defence of the USPGA Championship is shock off. This is the Sunday Times. This exclusive extract from a book about him published this week reveals the lengths he went to, the money he spent, and the company he kept to maintain his betting compulsion. Yes, so he gambles a lot, so what? But I suppose when separate to that is the whole fact that he, you know, there was a leverage between him and the Saudis and this LIV Tour and the PGA Tour, where he's made, 100 million out of the PGA Tour. So where do you stand on the whole Phil thing?
Well, I was going to be buying this book anyway, but the extract
I've never looked forward to book more as much as I have this one.
Yeah, for obvious reasons. I mean, Shipnuck is a brilliant writer. Phil Mickelson has been a fascinating character for 25 years. You know, the guy who could never get it done, never get over the line in the majors, always in Tiger's shadow. And then it happened for him. Was it 04 in the Masters? I think was his first one. First of 6 major titles, the oldest winner of a major title, I believe, after last year. And a guy who's always divided opinion. If you're a kind of a casual golf follower like me, he's one of the guys you turn on the TV for.
So exciting.
Like the manner in which he plays. And it's interesting as well because there's another piece, David Walsh in the Times is talking about Greg Norman's fronting of the Saudi Golf Tour. And he's describing Norman, and I was just thinking of Mickelson as he was describing Norman in the way he played, in that he's not only fearless, he has no idea how to be afraid, he doesn't have a safe shot, he has a death wish, he makes the worst decisions under pressure. Like, all of that sounds to me like the way Mickelson used to be. Wasn't he renowned as the guy who couldn't play it properly to get
a stubborn gambler?
Yeah, that's interesting now, isn't it? You know, when everything comes to light. So 2 very interesting guys who are the 2 faces that we're coming to put together with the Saudi tour for all sorts of reasons. You're right, the gambling thing in itself shouldn't be of any interest, but when you add it into the Saudi issue, I mean, he's earned $100 million from the PGA Tour, and the accounts here say he lost $40 million, but it's nearly half his income.
We don't know what he won. We don't know the extent of his earnings as well. Look, for him, 40 million could be the same as 400 quid over a year for somebody. We don't know, but look,
it's amazing that what I find really, really interesting is the fact that guys like Steve Flesh and Tom Lehman, the former CBS announcer Gary McCord, are all quoted about it.
Well, this obviously was a huge part of Phil Mickelson's life. That this was present all the time in his life, was gambling.
Yeah.
When he didn't win a major title to the age of 33. Like, how many majors could he have won?
Well, and you could flip that on its head. The fact he did win them, if all this was going on, is incredible as well. And it just shows as well, I mean, there's one anecdote about him surreptitiously listening to a game that he had money on during his round with an earpiece and a radio hidden in his clothes. And then McCord, the former CBS golfer, is talking about how his caddy Bones, so McCord would be up in a TV tower, and every time Phil got to my hole, Bones would look at me and I would flash the odds. If Phil had a 15-footer, I'd flash 3 fingers, which meant the odds were 3-1. If he was 60 feet, I'd give him... Like, that's incredible stuff. Do you know, like a guy... I know it's 4.5 hours, and guys, you can't be fully zeroed in on your golf game all that time, but to be doing that, and yet at the same time, it struck me that everybody with a gambling problem, it does filter into your life, doesn't it? I mean, if you're sitting at an office doing up figures as an accountant or whatever, and you have a gambling problem, it affects that part of your life. So it shouldn't be that surprising.
Well, we can say that he had a compulsion. I don't know if we can say he had a problem, but he definitely had a compulsion.
Yeah.
The thing for me, though, whether Mickelson's gambling, and obviously that's a juicy part of the book, and we'll see what else is in the book, but it's the greed is the one thing I have the bigger issue with the Saudi tour. It is just the disgusting greed of these players, like joining this tour. Now, I'm sure there are going to be lawsuits. They're independent contractors. That's what they will argue. The PGA Tour will argue, well, we're a club that have made you rich. You have to commit to us. You can't be joining a competing organisation. We've got broadcast deals and sponsorships to adhere to, and give the people that are supporting us financially their just desserts in terms of their investment. It's just, there's no honour in players joining the Saudi tour for me. It is only about one thing and one thing only, and that's money. And when you've had 81 people executed in Saudi Arabia in March, like there's nothing of value for it. Like the value of a PGA Tour is that it's exciting for fans. It's exciting for the best players in the world to play each other. Then they go with the 4 major championships. There's a lot of heritage, prestige. The greats of the game: Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer. Even from our own country, back to Fred Daly, to Joe Carr, to Padraig Harrington, to Christy O'Connor, senior and junior. The beauty of the courses, the magic of the game, Seve, all these great stories. Mickelson even being one of those, and just this soulless tour, which is only about one thing, and that's money. And it just, to me, is just there's absolutely nothing admirable about it whatsoever.
I agree with that, but I agree with that. One thing I will say from a purely business of sport point of view, now take out the Saudi, if this wasn't the Saudis coming in at this, if it was some other crowd. If you look at the history of sports business, go back to the 50s or the 60s and the NFL and the AFL, and there was anti-competitive accusations against the NFL when other leagues tried to come in. You look at Kerry Packard with cricket in the 70s or 80s or whenever it was. You look at the Bosman ruling in soccer. So there's always these people from the outside trying to say, why should this be a closed shop? Why should somebody else not come in with a different idea? And people do come up with the arguments, well, this is the way it is. There's a heritage, there's the majors, there's Test cricket, there is, the Chicago Bears or whatever it might be. That's from a purely business point of view. So in that sense, the players being independent contractors, you could argue that they have a point there. That said, I agree with everything you have said. It's despicable that this is coming from the source that it is coming from, and it is all about greed, and it is all about money. And some of the utterances we've had purely in that terms from some of the people, about I have to feed my family kind of job, has been awful, absolutely awful, and there's no excuse for it.
Where do you stand on it, Joanne?
Yeah, absolutely echo everything, that has been said definitely before. I think Brendan is right. I think in this situation, it's not the what people are annoyed about, it's the who are proposing it that people are annoyed about. It's the way people are kind of going about it. It's the secrecy. It's the PR shame of I can't say I'm going to the LIV because people will hate me because I clearly support Saudi Arabia, but then they're going off to Saudi Arabia anyway. It's incredibly frustrating from a golf perspective. I think we're all not stupid enough here to realise that the PGA Tour and the way it goes about its business absolutely needs to be changed. Absolutely. I think, we do have to look at players being independent contractors. I think we do have to look at players hitting their shot, but yet they don't own the rights to it and stuff like that. But the people who are coming out saying that, the likes of your Phil Mickelsons, can't argue with that because they have been making such an insane amount of money from the PGA Tour. Like, these are the ones who can't come out and say it, do you know what I mean? Like, there are people who are lesser on the tour who could come out and say it. Obviously, they wouldn't be listened to as much, but you could be like, yeah, listen, I get it, you're living in your car and you're going day to day across America, you know, trying to play golf or whatever. Those are the people you understand it for, but these aren't the people that the Saudi investors, Greg Norman or whoever, wants to be on their tour. So yes, it's incredibly sad. I think as well something that has to be looked at as well, and it's definitely an uncomfortable topic, is that the European Tour has gone to Saudi Arabia as well before. So this isn't the first time that Saudi Arabia has been flirting with golf. You know, they have taken Shane Lowry over to Saudi. They have, you know, looked at other things. So there are, you know, I suppose if we start really like holding everyone to account, we won't have a game at the end of the day. But you know, there are uncomfortable conversations that have to be had as well with the European Tour going over to Saudi as well.
Well, sure, the European Tour is like backed by DP, so there's you know, it's to me the issue is almost like it's the fact that the golf is now in danger of fracturing and it becoming a much less appealing proposition. And I really enjoy the best players playing against each other, and that is now under threat if like a bit like darts in the 90s, if this all breaks away.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely with you on that end. And I think what always stood out to me, there was two things really about the whole Phil Mickelson versus the PGA that stood out to me. The first was obviously when the Masters was on, and Greg Norman after the Masters said, "Oh, I actually know who was going all along. I just didn't want to announce it during the Masters because I didn't want to distract from the Masters." Like, okay, Greg, you really think the press release is going to distract from the greatest, you know, sporting event in golf? I don't think that's possible. And second, the big thing as well that stuck out to me from a PGA point of view was in the PGA statement that said that Phil won't be there, they also said that they were thinking about the wife, Amy, and I thought that was something that was incredibly interesting. Whether there's something going on there, like why would you name the wife, you know, so openly? Like, I'm not too sure. Like that was a move in the press release that I think was made for a particular reason. But I suppose at the end of the day, it is disappointing to see. You know, we know Phil's going over. We know Lee West was going over. You know, Sergio Garcia said, you know, his line at one of the tours.
Yeah, I don't have to play for you anymore, or whatever it was. Yes.
Yeah, so whatever that means, obviously that's ambiguous. Obviously we think we know what that means, but you know, it's ambiguous in itself. But yeah, it is incredibly disappointing. I think the PGA Tour, it's kind of like when the Super League was kind of breaking away and UEFA looked like the good guys, and you were like, these people aren't the good guys. I kind of feel like it's the same with golf. You know, none of these people are good, you know, in that respective term, but we just have one that's a lot worse than the other.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Like, who knows what the deal is with Amy Mickelson or anything being brought into it. But the Greg Norman article said he's picked to the right man and charismatic. Norman writes David Walsh. I don't think Greg Norman's charismatic.
That's a strange headline, isn't it?
Now the journalists don't write the headlines necessarily, but Greg Norman to me has been a public relations disaster for this. Like the comments about Khashoggi. Now he said it was reprehensible, but then he also said, you know, the whole comment about we all make mistakes in life, that kind of thing. More than 30 years ago, Norman tried to establish his right to play wherever he wished. They stopped him. Now with almost limitless financial backing, he's back and having another go. 35 years ago, Norman was 32 and one of the best players in the world. He was also a United Nations blacklist of about 500 athletes, actors and entertainers who performed in Africa and refused to commit to not doing so again while the apartheid regime was in place. Maybe the PGA Tour is not perfect, and I would agree that it's the least worst option, but they have to crush this. If they don't crush this Saudi league, and the only way they can crush it is through the fact that this thing doesn't have any credibility because players are not interested in playing in it. If it gets a groundswell of support, if they start going to invitationals, if it builds over the next 2 to 3 years, then you're going to have a fracturing of golf. You'll have competing events in the United States against the PGA Tour. That's what I don't want to see, just from a point of view of enjoying the game and enjoying the sport. And there's just too much money in golf. There's just like it's become saturated by money, and even the PGA Tour and the DP Tour have joined forces to give the golfers more money. You've got these ridiculous player incentive programs about social media. Bryson DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka contriving this stuff last year, allegedly, and getting millions of dollars for doing nothing.
Yeah,
it is completely lost its moorings as a sport from the people that, you know, would want to maybe spend 10 or 15 quid to go and watch it.
And it's interesting as well because you talk about that credibility thing. This is going to be a long game. The Saudis have a bottomless pit of money to throw at this, and there's an interesting line in David Walsh's piece on Norman where he talks about, Norman says that any player filing a lawsuit against the PGA or DP World Tours need not worry about cost. LIV Golf has been preparing for this day and will pay for any action, and they would actually welcome a legal battle that shifted the narrative from human rights in Saudi Arabia to the legal rights of elite golfers. So, you know, talk about the likes of Kerry Packer and that in years gone by. These guys are like, it's like the Premier League. You know, you had your local carpet salesman who had a few million quid who took over the local club and made it big. Now we've got independent states in the Gulf that are taking over. It's different ball game. If
you're an antitrust lawyer and you're out of work, you now are going to be okay for the next few years. Joanne, anything before we go that you might want to point the listeners to before we go off air?
Listen, I think Cork Camogie, anyone who wants to watch, they should watch, a little bit of the Camogie highlights if they possibly can last night, because Cork were pushed all the way by Clare in a very exciting game. And I think, hopefully now, fingers crossed, all going well, Walsh Park won't be as traumatic as what it's supposed to be. I hope it's not like watching Jordan Spieth at the Masters where it's death by 1,000 cuts. Like, I hope we just bleed out if necessary. Like, I would rather die from bleeding than, death by 1,000 cuts. So please, Cork GA, no pressure on that. But I think, pleasure to be here, boys. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Oh, Joanne, Jordan Spieth, remember, can win the career Grand Slam next week.
I don't want to believe, John. I've spent a lot of my time believing and being let down by that man. I do not want to speak. So when you come to me on Friday, chances are I will be believing again.
Brenton, anything to point to?
Yeah, the Haaland stuff is interesting.
Yeah, it is. There's various articles, Jonathan Wilson, and there's pieces in the Sunday Times about Everton had the chance to get him for 60 grand and didn't.
Yeah.
And also a piece about him as well in one of the papers, that just in terms of the fact that he played all these multidisciplinary sports as a teenager and how that helped him. Which is definitely interesting.
There's good stuff about him across the week.
Yeah, across the week and across
really
the papers
stuff
today.
Yeah.
So, Joanne, thank you.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Great stuff. Joanna Reardon there, Irish Times columnist. Brendan O'Brien from the Irish Examiner. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks, John.
I look forward to seeing you soon. Now, Off the Ball on your radio from 1 to 7 on News Talk and on the OTB Sports app. We've got 2 live and exclusive Premier League commentary games to bring you. First up, West Ham against Manchester City. Stephen Doyle and Brian Kerr providing the call there. Then Jessica Farry and Vinnie Perth will describe Everton against Brentford. We've also got reporters at the GA Championship matches between Waterford and Cork, Kildare and Westmeath, Dublin and Meath, and Derry and Monaghan. If you missed any of the Sunday paper review, you can check out the podcast on the OTB Sports app or wherever you get your pods. You can also watch it back on the YouTube channel, the Off the Ball channel. Back on your radio on News Talk at 1 o'clock. We'll chat then.
The Sunday papers
on Off the Ball.